Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Here's Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. St. Lucia nearing conclusion of a minimum wage consideration. This story takes the lead in today's edition of Caribbean Perspective for Monday, 28th August 2023. Details after this important message.
The hurricane season is now upon us, so we as Caribbean people need to remember to think safety and be prepared. Avoid venturing outside during a storm or hurricane, especially if there are strong winds. Rooftops and other debris are often blown about and can cause great damage.
Welcome back. St. Lucia's Prime Minister Philip J. Pierce says government will soon announce a livable minimum wage. Zane Romulus of the DBS News World reports.
In the face of the rising cost of goods and services and generally low wages, Prime Minister Philip Pierre says his administration has been doing all it can within its power to buffer the high cost of living. Speaking at the SLP's recently held town hall meeting, the Prime Minister clapped back at critics who say otherwise. He cited inflationary pressures as being mainly responsible for the high costs of goods and services.
Let us deal with inflation, the cost of living that they always make a big fuss about, the price of everything going up, and what the government is doing. In 2002, our year in government, inflation was 5.7% in some places, and in other places 7%. Inflation. In 2023, when it's expected that inflation should decrease, it hasn't. Inflation is still stubbornly at 5%. That is the reality of inflation in St. Lucia and inflation in the world.
In that regard, his administration has implemented several policy measures to cushion the blow to citizens. That includes suspension of the 6% service charge on imported price-controlled goods and an income tax exemption for those earning $25,000. The establishment of a minimum wage is also part of this, says the Prime Minister. An announcement on when this will become a reality will happen soon.
Which means that there's going to be a minimum wage, that people should not work for less than that. But we are in a market. And the reason why we are taking so long to do that, because we need to discuss with the Chamber of Commerce, we need to discuss with the Manufacturers Association, we need to discuss with all these people before we come up with a wage that is going to benefit everyone.
Already, the government has made a one-off payment of $500 to pensioners. This will be followed up with another payout of $600. In addition, the Cabinet has taken the decision to adjust pensioners' monthly disbursements based on the current cost of living. The Prime Minister, however, did not share details of how much that increase will be. He also spoke about the measures which target civil servants.
We have removed the VAT on some building materials so that they can repair their houses. We've done that. We've paid them the back pay. And not only that, we have instructed that negotiations for changes in the salary structure begin immediately so that civil servants can get a fair day's work for a fair day's, give a fair day's work for a fair day's pay. So we don't want any hale-caste in the negotiations. We want to sit like men and women and decide, let us negotiate based on the reality of the country so everybody can benefit.
The removal of VAT on specific items like female sanitary products has also been cited by the Prime Minister as a measure to reduce the impact of the high cost of living. For the DBS News World, I am Zane Romulus.
Citing the renowned Jamaican-American sociologist Orlando Patterson, a school principal shared with CVM Live that the initial route toward change involves creating incentives. Celine Campbell of CVM Live filed this report.
Principal of the Yallas High School, Mark Malava, says he is not convinced the ministry is dealing with the issues surrounding teachers as they ought to. Describing it as a crisis, Malava says issues relating to salaries and compensations were skirted at the recently held teachers' conference.
It's overdue now. There are still matters as it relates to graduate allowance, for example, and how those should be treated. Remote inducement allowances are still also outstanding with the government, and there seem to be no immediate end in sight as it relates to resolving those issues.
He states the General Council, along with the Jamaica Teachers Association, may resort to more decisive actions if the government fails to respond within the stipulated timeline they have established. Malava believes teachers were mistreated during negotiations surrounding compensation, and to add further to their misery, the government continues to relapse on its promises.
Teachers literally had to fight tooth and nail for every dollar that they were able to eke out. Yeah? And even after accepting the deal, teachers felt that they were bullied, cajoled into accepting the deal. And even after accepting the deal, what you find is that teachers still have not gotten what they have accepted or agreed to take.
Malava says in attempting to solve the issue of teacher migration, the government of Jamaica seeks to replace rather than retain. While admitting the approach is feasible, he asserts this solution is not without significant challenges.
Teacher quality is invariably compromised. And the teachers that are leaving the system are primarily your STEM teachers. Teachers would have spent 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years in the system. They would have benefited from workshops, seminars, so they would have fine-tuned their craft.
Therefore making it difficult for them to be replaced. He adds once quality is compromised, then inevitably students' performance will as well. Celine Campbell reporting for CVM Live.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick.
Bank of Jamaica's governor clarifies comment about large salary increases and inflation. TVJ News has more.
The governor has been under fire from trade unionists, the private sector, and members of the public since the BOJ's press briefing on Monday. He spoke earlier this evening on Radio Jamaica's Beyond the Headlines program.
I am not against a wage increase. It's a question of how much. Inflation has been at 6.6% is the last number. A wage increase in and around that number, a little above, a little below, is not going to hurt inflation. And it is going to put people back where they were before. Every working person has suffered from inflation over the last 2 years. And to recover from that is understandable. But that's a different kettle of fish to say, let's do very large increases in wages. That is counterproductive, and it is my job to say so. If I didn't do that, I could be accused of abandoning a major mandate of the Bank of Jamaica, which is to manage inflation within 4 to 6% per annum.
Mr. Biles insists that the salary increase given to most BOJ staff members, including senior executives, was very close to inflation. He also reacted to the massive salary increase across the public sector earlier this year.
One of the problems with it is that it would have a negative demonstration effect. So when you look at the dollar amount involved in that increase, it amounted to, I believe it was said in Parliament, $1.7 billion. Now, a wage increase of $1.7 billion in the total economy is not going to drive inflation. And I'm not commenting on whether the persons are justified in getting it or not. I'm not making any comment. I'm just saying $1.7 billion of increase in the economy is not going to drive inflation. However, it does have a demonstration effect. And I said it at the time. I said it does have a negative impact by way of its demonstration effect.
In the meantime, local Rastafarians weigh in on the newly released marijuana bill in the Bahamas. Details in this ZNS News item with Cleopatra Murphy.
The Rastafarian community is decrying the just-released cannabis bill over a lack of consultation, charging that although they met with government, that meeting was to notify them on what was actually in the proposed legislation. Prophet Jao Meki Bo says, as it stands, the legislation does not align with the Rastafarian faith. He's also taking issue with efforts to decriminalize up to 30 grams of marijuana and the imposition of a $250 fine.
The decriminalization that people look at, it still comes to the point that you will be arrested. It's just how you will be charged. That's not anything change. And what we see is under the previous administration draft of what they wanted, at least they had steps in place for after you be charged up to 3 to 4 times. This one says either you take the charge and pay the fine, or you go to court and get it put on your record.
With efforts now to create a cannabis industry, the Rastafarians believe practitioners like themselves will not be able to participate, with one lamenting that persons with criminal records for having possessed marijuana or another drug cannot apply for a license.
That would be a qualifying criteria that you wouldn't meet. And with that being said, it's like almost every Rasta, you could almost do that too. And many of us have been charged innocently. At the same time, we had to just go along with the charges that they would have put on you.
Most egregious, the Rastafarians say that the bill restricts where they can perform their sacrament.
Also said that the only way they would want us to consume our sacrament is at the compound, the church compound, which most Rastafari in the Bahamas do not live at the church compound. The church compound is not big enough to house all of us. Within the private capacity of our homes and also within secluded areas such as even the beach or whatever, we consume our sacrament and we give praises regularly.
With public consultation set to begin soon, the Rastafarians say now is the time to speak up, and they're encouraging everyone to do the same. Attorney General Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder says the legislation is just a draft and is encouraging everyone to give their feedback. For the Bahamas Tonight, I'm Cleopatra Murphy.
Some trade union leaders in Trinidad and Tobago say the 10% wage increase demand made by the Trinidad and Tobago Airlines Pilots Association is more than reasonable. CNC3's Andrea Perez Sobers tells us more.
Union leaders have weighed in on the 10% wage increase call made by the TNT Airline Pilots Association for the Caribbean airline pilots. Communication Workers Union Secretary General Clyde Elder told Business Watch earlier today the demand is more than reasonable for the period 2015 to 2020.
So the 4% was not reasonable. And the 10% being demanded by the Pilots Association, it is more than reasonable. And I say that against the backdrop that we have had increases in cost of living beyond 10%. We have seen increases in fuel allowance and fuel prices beyond 10%. We have seen that the purchasing power of one's dollar has deteriorated beyond 10%.
National Union of Government and Federated Workers President General James Lambert says CAL or the government should not deem the 10% increase as unreasonable because of the hours and specialized skills to fly an aircraft.
Because the government is not disclosing the reason why they are saying, as they have done with the 4%. Nobody brought anything to the table indicating what the economic situation is. All that they tell you, the economy is not at what it's supposed to be.
The stick-out action by the pilots last weekend also affected the business community. Greater San Fernando Chamber of Commerce President Kiran Singh said many business owners in San Fernando who were scheduled to fly out those 2 days had to reschedule their meetings.
The narration that was offered of passengers is not significant cover towards that. Whatever it is, of transport, no transport, get from or a resident or business in South Trinidad.
TNT Chamber of Industry and Commerce Chief Executive Officer Stephen DeGans says the business community and the passengers understood the situation as CAL was calling to give updates on the cancelled flights. CAL has since said it has been able to fully restore all flights.
Communications did help. And there were students who were affected and there were business people affected. But generally, as it was only for 1 day or 1.5 days, people felt that CAL was making they were really attempting to sort it out quickly.
Hubbard's is once again innovating the way you shop with its new online store, providing 24-hour shopping convenience. You can shop now for appliances, hardware, houseware, building material, and more. Free delivery island-wide. Start shopping now at hubbardshardware.gd. Safe, convenient, reliable.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.